Being punished for being right. Retroactively shooting the messenger. Hashtag trumpeting. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and being right about something you never wanted turns more and more bitter as time goes on. Even more so, sometimes there is basically no winning with individuals. Sure, when it comes to opinions, we shouldn't always base things off of whether you win or lose. And I am ultimately just an opinion channel mixed in with a bit of news and comedy, though I'd prefer to be playwriting and screenwriting all the time. Hint, hint, any producers, you can hit me up on Twitter. The Twitter handle that I use is in the description. Anyhow, I did not make this channel to set out to just win some sort of cultural debate exactly, because that would be somewhat implying that I was searching for a desired outcome. If I were trying to simply win, I would have openly and fully advocated for Trump because he was who I thought was going to win ever since the primaries. Basically, everybody in my social sphere is completely left-leaning, minus some people that I have met through YouTube and a few anti-SJW social groups on, Facebook generally. If you know me at all, one of the first things you'll realize is that I am actually extremely loyal. Probably almost to a fault sometimes. Once I realized during the primaries that mainstream media, the DNC, and blogs like Everyday Feminism were actively gunning for Hillary Clinton to an unfair degree, I then knew the most likely outcome was that it would lead to Trump taking the Oval Office eventually. At that point, I figured I needed to do something about this. First things first, I began trying to warn my social media spheres as best I could, and I was generally mocked, unfriended, blocked, and called a conspiracy theorist, as well as a misogynist and all sorts of other mean things. Every dedicated Sanders supporter had this happen to them, so I won't bore you with the details. The next thing I did was try to really get through to some of the people closest to me, only to be met with somewhat similar dismissiveness. You see, another thing I will confess about myself is that I have a long history of being somewhat volatile in terms of opinions. I rant a lot online, sometimes while intoxicated, and many people close to me tune me out on occasion, and that doesn't completely offend me. Sometimes I'm just kind of pissed off and saying some weird stuff, and people know that the next day I'll kind of be over it. It's what comes with actually being my friend. I am kind of one of those people that long used social media like somewhat of a journal, though I always had a separate body of work that was more of my serious and on the record types of opinions, which now is YouTube, sorta. Unfortunately for me, this time my opinions about this election ended up becoming more and more true, and they weren't really a part of any sort of work. They were just taking over the entirety of my life. They became a prophecy that ended up coming true, and that's one of the reasons that I really made my YouTube channel, because I knew that this was going to happen. It's not that my friends didn't know that I was smart and that none of them listened to me at all, because some of them did. But the bottom line was that in order to accept what I was telling them, it would mean changing a bunch of personal plans for the way that they were living their lives as left-leaning people who assumed that our side was quote-unquote winning, when I could offer extensive evidence to the contrary. We were setting ourselves up to lose with our complacency in terms of allowing forces like mainstream media and feminism to try so blatantly to load the deck in favor of Hillary Clinton, only to be caught red-handed by alternative media and the YouTube skeptic community that more voters were watching than anybody in my spheres realized. Nobody wants to hear, "You're gonna lose." But when you know they're gonna lose and you care about these people, you have to tell them if you have any integrity. Unfortunately, when their team finally loses and their innocence is forcibly shattered, a lot of the time they don't seem to go back and thank you for warning them. No, seemingly so far this hasn't happened to me even once. Rather, people often become frustrated and take it out on you. It's worse than shooting the messenger. It's like accepting the message, but just putting it in a pile like bills you can't yet pay and are afraid to even open, and then shooting the mailman 6 months later once you finally realize you owe like $16,000 to a dentist because you never paid for a root canal, and now you owe interest. First, they might blame you as if somehow you made everything happen this way. even though you didn't want it to end like this, then they'll likely try to come up with some reason why they were never really wrong and that you were never really right, or that even though you are right, it is because of completely different reasons than you presented, because they are right in their head, even though they know they're wrong, and you know they're wrong, and they'll admit that they're wrong, but they're still sort of right about something. Just, you've probably heard it by now if you saw this coming like I did. They'll go through every bit of mental gymnastics necessary to make things easier for themselves. And in the end, when they subconsciously finally do accept what really happened, they'll probably never give you the satisfaction of telling you that you were right. Even when you weren't telling them your prediction just to win an argument, but because you cared about them. You will not probably ever get the satisfaction of having them say, "Thank you for warning me that I needed to reassess my life, where I live, and my finances 6 months ago." Those of them who write for blogs will continue to blame the trolls who dox them for everything that went wrong, instead of admitting to the fact that their own bullying behavior led to numerous people being doxed, and this vote might be a form of retaliation from the collective mass of people who think like those that these bloggers have hurt. If these bloggers do realize this, they certainly cannot convince themselves to care, or it would also be career suicide. I'm really not talking about any one specific person I know. I am talking about basically everybody I know, including those I haven't even heard from. Those that I can assume are afraid to face me for their own sanity. Maybe that is the right choice for them for now. Who am I to judge? I guess all I can do is try to be reasonable in my more official work, like my YouTube channel. Though I can't always promise I will be reasonable when you catch me in conversation. I might chew your head off at the wrong moment, as I certainly do have a temper. But on the official record, I believe the best thing for me to do will be just to allow these people in my life to take the time they need to adjust their worldview and continue to be a positive voice of skeptical truth-seeking to the best of my abilities. Again, I'm ultimately just an opinion blogger. I don't always fact-check as thoroughly as some, and I never wanted to be a journalist. Oh my god, I took journalism in college, and once I realized what the industry was actually like in terms of being a, reputable journalist, I was just like, no, that's not for me. But when it turns out that people can get more truth from me than CNN, well, that speaks for itself. So, I want to just write plays and movies, but I'm doing YouTube for now. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.